I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Rose Mape, and I'm the director of the Pennsylvania Association of Bed and Breakfast Inns. So I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar that is on the ins and outs of bed and breakfast insurance. With us today is Justin Rose. Justin is with Insurance Service United and is responsible for generating new business opportunities and meeting with clients to ensure their insurance coverage needs are being met to protect their business and their assets. Insurance Service United is a Diamond sponsor and has been a strong supporter of PABI since our inception in 2012. With that, I'm going to turn the program over to Justin. Justin would like this to be interactive. Since there's only a few on the call here, you feel free to unmute yourself and engage and have questions for Justin. So with that, Justin, it's all yours.
Good morning, everyone. So yeah, like she just said, I do want to invite everyone to turn the camera on, come on mic. Feel free to interrupt me. I'm not going to get offended. I'd like to make this more interactive as opposed to me just talking to you guys, because I am talking about insurance. It's not the most, entertaining topic to talk about. So more interaction we can get, the more enjoyable I think it'll be for everyone. So to get started, I think I'm going to introduce myself a little bit. So I grew up in Westminster, Maryland, and I moved up here to York about 7 or 8 months ago. I've been with Insurance Services United for roughly 2 years. So like I said, graduated from York College. I passed my property and casualty insurance certification in December of 2019 after I graduated. So since then, I've been working here, and it's been good. It's quite a grind, but it is good. And then another thing that I do part-time is I'm a tennis professional instructor at a tennis club up here locally in York. And so I'm busy 40 hours a week doing this full-time, and then probably supplementing 15 to 20 hours a week teaching. So I'm quite busy, but it has been going well. For today, couple things that I want to talk about regarding insurance is sort of the comparison between homeowners insurance versus business insurance, and why in pretty much every case, business insurance for bed and breakfast is going to be more comprehensive and better for you than your typical homeowners policy. So what a homeowners insurance policy typically covers, the average homeowners policy covers 3 or 4 things. The first thing is going to be the replacement cost of the structure itself, so your actual home. There's a second coverage for contents, and typically that is a percentage of the building coverage, so roughly 70%. So if you have a $100,000 house, most of the bed and breakfast are going to be a lot more than that. And typically it covers about $70,000 worth of contents inside the building. And then there's another percentage based on the replacement cost of the building that can be applied to outbuildings. So with bed and breakfast, typically a lot of them will have like an outside cottage. So it's a separate structure that has 1 or 2 guest rooms in it, and that's where that coverage can be applied. And again, that's typically a percentage of the replacement cost of the main home. So you have the replacement cost of building, the contents inside, and then the outbuildings. The other coverages typically on the insurance policies for homeowners is liability coverage for any injuries that happen at the location. And typically this gets maxed out at around $500,000 for a homeowner's insurance policy, which when you're running a business out of your home, which is what all of you are doing as bed and breakfast owners, that might be a little bit low depending on what can go wrong at the location. So the final coverage on the average homeowner's policy is something called loss of use. So if, let's say that there is some sort of loss at your house, and maybe a fire or something, and the insurance company covers the claim and you're trying to get that rebuilt by the insurance company, then you don't have a place to live. So loss of use is payments to you while you are getting the building rebuilt to find temporary housing at a separate location. So as far as homeowners insurance goes, that's pretty much every coverage. There is a lot of times endorsements that can be put on the policies that are like sort of bells and whistles for other small coverages. That could be things like water backup, equipment breakdown, utility services, things like that. One thing about the homeowners policies regarding bed and breakfast that it's sort of important for you guys to understand is that there is no coverage based on a homeowner's insurance policy for any business operations or business loss of income. So what's important about loss of income is, let's say, again, there was a fire or something or some sort of claim that was covered by the insurance company, and the bed and breakfast now becomes, you can't operate it. So as a bed and breakfast owner, that is one of your major sources of income. So one, you lose your house. Two, you lose a source of income. So on a business insurance policy, there is something called business income loss. So if there's a covered claim, like a fire, and you can't operate the business anymore, they will supplement, in addition to replacing the building, they will supplement your lost income as well. And that will include extra expenses such as finding temporary housing elsewhere. So it's more comprehensive with the business policy to get everything covered properly as opposed to just a homeowner's policy. This is just a separate fact I wanted to talk about that you guys should bring up to your insurance agent just to make sure that you have it on your current policy. So there's a huge difference with insurance between replacement cost and actual cash value. And a good way for me to sort of explain the difference here is, let's say you purchase a $1,000 TV, and then 5 years down the road, something happens and you need the insurance to buy you a new TV. So with depreciation, that $1,000 TV now might only be worth $200, but to replace it with an equivalent, it might cost $800 or $900. So if your insurance policy is based on actual cash value and you lose that TV, you're only going to get $200 based on depreciation for that item, versus replacement costs. They will replace that TV with an equivalent, which might cost $800 instead of that $200. So if you do ever talk to your current agent about just information about your policy, making sure you have things set up properly, replacement costs versus actual cash value is something that you might want to bring up to them, just to make sure you're more comprehensively covered as opposed to the bare minimum, which a lot of people do have. So another part about the business insurance policies that can be more comprehensive as opposed to the homeowner's policies is, with business insurance, typically the liability limit that they will pay to you is a lot higher. So when we quote our bed and breakfast and we insure them, the minimum that we do for liability is typically $1 million, whereas, as I said earlier, the maximum that homeowners policies typically are at is $500,000. So again, this is for any injuries, any situation where the owner of the bed and breakfast would be liable for any sort of injury to a guest, to themselves, to anything like that. That could be slip and falls. It could be some sort of claim with a dog or a pool. So it's better with the business insurance policy to have a higher liability limit just in case anything goes wrong, because there have been claims in the past in multiple industries where liability becomes an issue and the business ends up going under because they get sued for it and they don't have the proper coverage, and then they essentially just go bankrupt because of it. All right. So essentially, those are a couple points as to why the business insurance policies are going to be overall just more effective for insuring a bed and breakfast as opposed to just a homeowner's policy. There are some situations where people will have a homeowner's policy that has an endorsement on it for some business insurance, and granted, that can cover you minimally as a business owner with a bed and breakfast. However, it's just not going to offer the same comprehensive coverage that an actual business owner's policy can provide for a bed and breakfast. So I'm going to transition over into a couple ways that we can lower insurance costs and risks as bed and breakfast owners. First one I have here is smoke detectors. So firstly, they are required by law, so you should have them. One thing that you can do is try and get hardwired smoke detectors as opposed to battery operated. So that way you never have to worry about whether or not they're operational or not. They're always going to be functional. And depending on the insurance carrier, they will offer a discount if you have hardwired smoke detectors. Not all of them do. But again, they are required by law, so you should have them. Another thing that you can sort of add to your bed and breakfast to actually get a discount from almost every insurance carrier is central station fire or burglary alarms. So the central station alarms are the ones that will immediately contact the fire department or police department, whether or not it is a burglar or fire alarm, respectively. So typically, insurance carriers will give you anywhere from 1% to 5% of a discount off of your insurance policy if you have those alarms. So they are something that can really just shave off a little bit of premium for your annual expenses. This next portion I want to talk about is about protection classes. So a lot of you won't have a ton of control over this as an established bed and breakfast. However, if you're an aspiring innkeeper and you have a property that you're kind of looking at purchasing and you want to start a business out of it, then this is something to keep in mind. So the protection class for any structure is determined by two factors. First being whether or not there is a fire hydrant within 1,000 feet, and the second being whether or not there is a fire department within 5 miles of the location. So based on those two factors, you're either going to have 3 different classifications for every building. You'll have unprotected, partially protected, and protected. So every single insurance policy is going to be less expensive for the business owner if they are fully protected. So fire hydrant within 1,000 feet and a fire department within 5 miles. It can be a pretty substantial difference in cost when you're fully protected versus unprotected. So unprotected can be very, very expensive to insure. There was one bed and breakfast I was working on a couple weeks back where they went from, we originally had them quoted as partially protected, but they let me know that they did find that they had fire hydrants within 1,000 feet. So they instead of being partially protected, they went to fully protected, and that shaved, I want to say, close to $500 or $600 off their annual insurance premium. So that is one thing to keep in mind if you are looking to buy a new location or just something to keep in mind to shave off insurance costs. One thing that is a little bit more bed and breakfast specific that we can talk about is whether or not you're pet friendly. So statistically, with homeowners insurance and relating to bed and breakfast insurance, pet claims, dog bites, those types of things are the most common type of insurance claim. A lot of times insurance carriers will have different lists of banned pets or animals that they don't want you to have on the location because they are stereotypically more aggressive, things like pit bulls, Rottweilers, German Shepherds, stuff like that. And as a bed and breakfast owner, the places that are pet friendly are typically not as appealing to insurance carriers because they view that as a huge liability when you have guests staying there and they bring their pit bull and it's around other guests, and dogs can get spooked. Even if they're trained well, any dog can get spooked and then bite someone, they have a claim, and then huge liability exposure. So if a bed and breakfast can operate as being non-pet friendly, they're most likely going to be able to find cheaper insurance rates because they're going to be more appealing to the insurance carriers in general. So you'd be able to shop around through different insurance carriers and find a better price as opposed to being limited to a select few because they will do your insurance since you are pet friendly. Another thing to keep in mind regarding insurance eligibility, if you have a bed and breakfast and you are more than 2 stories tall and you have guest bedrooms above the 2nd floor, you want to make sure that you have multiple ways of exiting those guest rooms, whether it be a fire escape or 2 sets of stairs coming on opposite sides of the house. Um, the insurance carriers want to make sure that if anything were to happen, if a fire were to break out on one side of the house, there are different ways for for the guests to exit the building safely, just to reduce possible expenses in an insurance claim. So again, not having different ways of exiting these rooms can actually be an eligibility issue for insurance. So if you don't have those exits, then some insurance carriers just won't even give you the opportunity to get a quote. This next one, pretty obvious. So if you're an insurance, or if you're a bed and breakfast owner and you have a bunch of claims in the past, typically anywhere from a 3 to 5 year period, your rate's probably going to go up, and it's going to be tough for you to shop around and find better rates for your insurance. So as a bed and breakfast owner, it's sort of your responsibility to try and keep your premises safe. If it snows, make sure you salt pathways, salt the driveways, make sure there's railings around steps and maybe on like outside of a porch, something like that, just to reduce any possible risks of actually having a claim. Because whenever you have a claim, your insurance rates go up. It's kind of just how it goes. It's not great, but it is what it is. And then one other thing here, so deductibles. If you think that you are paying a little too much for your current bed and breakfast insurance, one thing that you can talk to your agent about is what your deductible actually is. So a lot of people have this sort of predetermined idea of how they should use their insurance policies, where like if they have a very small claim, like let's say their window breaks and maybe it's only $200 or $300 to repair the window, you should probably just eat the cost and repair the window. Again, that keeps your claim count down and in turn reduces your insurance rate. So regarding the deductibles, higher deductibles for bed and breakfasts are pretty much a good idea. So a lot of these bed and breakfasts, to replace them, are more than $1 million. So if you have a $5,000 deductible, that's fine. You should probably keep it at least $2,500 or $5,000, keep the higher deductible, and only use the insurance policy if you are to have some sort of catastrophic loss. So you don't want to, like I said, try and make a claim for a broken window, because you can just eat the $200 to replace the window. But if you were to lose your house, that's when you want to use the insurance, because then you'll get that $1 million to replace the building. So in a nutshell, that's our philosophy as insurance agents, is to use the policy when it's something that will be a financial burden on you. Insurance is to make sure you can get back on your feet to where you were before a loss, not just to supplement something that goes wrong that's very minor. So again, going back to a little bit about your responsibility as a bed and breakfast owner to make sure everything's safe, there are things that you should take into account and update, make sure everything is looking good. So this could be things like the roof. Typically, insurance carriers like it when roofs are no more than 20 years old. Once they get past the 20-year point, shingles tend to fly off easily. They tend to leak. Structurally, they're not as stable, so it's just more of a risk for these insurance carriers to actually insure you, because things can go wrong that way. Another thing that you can take a look at are your gutters, making sure they're not rusted out or full of leaves, stuff like that. Because when they're full of leaves and have all this junk in them, then water can build up and then pool up on your roof and then start to leak into the house, and then you have some sort of water claim. So making sure things are cleared off in that regard. You want to make sure, like I said earlier, any walkways or stairs, they got some railings, especially if it's snowy out. Make sure you salt them, make sure the snow's cleared off. Want to shovel everything off, get it removed with a loader if it's on the driveway. And another thing regarding stairs is something you can put on them is actually like tread pads. So that's good for slip and fall claims. Um, so essentially, they're very very inexpensive pads. You just essentially glue down to the stairs that just make the risk of someone falling much less than what it otherwise would be, especially if it is snowy and cold out. So far, I want to open up to some questions. Anybody have any questions for me so far? Let me know. I have been talking quite a bit about a lot of different topics, kind of bouncing around here. But feel free to come off mic or turn the camera on, turn on your mic. Let me know if you got anything.
Hey, Justin, good morning. This is Robin over in Carlisle. How are you doing this morning?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. So, and you may have said this at the intro. I was just coming in as you were doing your intro. In your years in working with the company you're with, how many claims have you seen through your company with? So we do offer pets at our place.
Mm-hmm.
But how many claims have you seen that you've actually had some type of a claim around a pet incident?
So personally, I've only been here about 2 years. I have seen no claims from any bed and breakfast that we insure, and we do insure over 135 of them. I could ask a couple people in the office, but I know statistically, like I said, pet claims are the most common, just because they're a pet. You never know what they're going to do, even if they are trained.
Right.
But besides the pet claims, a lot of claims you'll run into are weather related. So if there's a big storm and tree limbs fall and hit the roof, damage the roof, those are more the common ones you're going to see. A lot of times we don't run into, large fires. Something with bed and breakfast that could also be a slight risk is if you have any fireplaces in any guest rooms. Insurance carriers don't like that,
Right.
especially ones that have an actual solid burning fuel source like wood. So if it's okay if like you have a fireplace where it's electric or gas powered, where there's not an actual fuel source being moved around by a guest to warm up their room. So I guess in a nutshell, to answer your question, I personally have not actually seen any claims from any of our bed and breakfasts. But
Yeah,
probably due to the fact that I've been here about 2 years.
We've owned the inn for 8 years, and until a year and a half ago we had our own dog here. Also, we had to put her down. But in those 8 years, and maybe it's probably because of the clientele, the guests that come to a bed and breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, the income level is a little bit higher, educated a little bit higher. But we have not had any problems with any of this, significant that would warrant any type of discussion around insurance or significant amounts of money.
Yep.
Now
I get what you're saying.
Yeah. Now the acts of that we've had lightning strikes that have taken out control boards and computers and appliances, and we've had a couple claims for that, but nothing on the pet side. So I guess knock on wood. Hopefully, after I ask this question and have this discussion, that doesn't change.
Right. Yeah. So regarding the appliances and all that, there are certain endorsements that you can put on bed and breakfast policies where they'll have something called equipment breakdown. So that's where you can have coverage for those things. If you don't have that endorsed on the policy, you might not have specific coverage for those types of things. But going back to pets real quick. So I don't want to make it seem like the insurance carriers won't insure you at all if you are pet friendly. A lot of them will make exceptions. So a couple that I've done in the past 2 months or so, they were pet friendly, but they had a restricted list of breeds that they would allow to stay at the bed and breakfast. And one thing that the insurance carriers did tend to like was the fact that these bed and breakfasts had one room that they would allow to be pet friendly. And this room had like its own exit. You could go straight from outside straight into the room, and you wouldn't be able to take the dog in any sort of common area. So definitely not in like a dining room or anything like that. They have this separate location where they can keep the dog separate from the other guests, as opposed to just letting it run free.
Yep.
then
We've got a similar setup. We have 3 guest rooms of our 8 that are pet friendly, and all
Okay.
3 are private entrances. Guest pets are not allowed in the main house. So same setup.
yep, if you have a setup like that, then most likely the pets wouldn't be that much of an issue. It's always a good idea though to restrict the breeds that you do let into the B&B. Just statistically, like I mean, you all have to know about it, like the pit bulls versus Rottweilers, German Shepherds even, which isn't great because I mean my parents have a German Shepherd and a Rottweiler and I love them and they're harmless. So I mean every dog is different, but it always is a good idea to have some sort of restrictions or have like the guests before they actually come to stay at the B&B, have them talk to you and say, hey, I have this pet. Never had any problems with it. Is it okay if we bring this pet and during our stay? And then just as long as you're aware of it and can take precautions if you need to, then the insurance carriers don't mind in most cases. But a lot of times they don't like certain breeds in general just because of statistically they can cause issues.
Justin, what does the insurance companies, carriers consider with service animals?
Say again?
Service animals. What is their view on that?
So most cases they don't mind that at all. So since those animals tend to be highly trained and a lot of times they're for things like anxiety, all these extra things like that, they're very well trained and very well behaved. So if a bed and breakfast is pet friendly, but they only allow service animals, then most insurance carriers are like, okay, that's totally fine. We'll offer a quote.
Yeah, but by law, regardless of whether the inn is pet friendly or not, they have to accept service dogs. That goes to the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Yep.
So if they're not pet friendly, doesn't matter. If somebody comes with a disability and has a service dog, then they have to allow them to stay. So I was just curious of that. I'm sure the insurance carriers know that of how they need that. And like you said, they are highly trained dogs.
Yep.
Okay.
So yeah, since that is with the ADA, there's no way the insurance carriers could say, hey, we're not gonna insure you because you allow service animals. Like if it's something that's regulated in that sense, then they have to still insure you, especially if they already did. So yeah, service animals, there's no way there's going to be any issues with them.
Okay.
Any other questions for me so far?
Yeah. Good morning. How are you?
Good. How are
brother.
you?
How could I reach out to you if I want to look into getting some insurance for my bed and breakfast?
So I can send my email and my phone number in the chat here, so you guys can have that.
Thank you.
Sure. So that is the office number for the agency, and then my specific email address is there you go. And yeah, so
I have a question.
hello.
This is Sally from the Manor on Front. So we're
Hi, Sally.
redoing our other mansion, the Mary Sachs.
Okay.
And currently we have we have 2 bedrooms slated for fireplaces,
Okay.
gas fireplaces, and then
okay.
one also in the sitting room. Are they allowed, or are you saying no?
Yes, they would be allowed. Again, the only time that fireplaces in guest rooms tend to be an issue is when it's sort of like a wood stove type of thing, or something where they actually have to physically put fuel in the fireplace to burn it, because then smoke can come out. It's more of a hazard for fires as opposed to something that's more controlled, like a gas or electric fireplace. Electric is obviously the most preferred when it's in a guest room because there's very little that can go wrong. It's essentially just a heat radiator.
Okay.
So.
And then my other question is, I know you said there's no coverage for loss of income,
Correct.
but you should have loss of use insurance instead?
Yep.
Okay,
So no. Well, let me clarify for a second. So on a homeowner's policy, in most cases, they have the loss of use. So that's when there's a claim and it's covered by the insurance carrier, but you can't live in the home while it's being rebuilt. So you have to find temporary housing elsewhere. So that's on the homeowners policies. However, on the homeowners policies, they don't have the loss of income. So on the business policy, it's called loss of income and extra expenses. And the way that works is if there's a covered claim, you can't run the business, you can't live there while it's being rebuilt, then they will pay for temporary housing elsewhere and supplement you for the lost income for not being able to operate the business. Does that make sense?
thank you.
Yep.
Wanted
Yeah,
to make
so-
sure I had the terminology straight. Thanks.
Right. So the loss of income is the important one that you want to have as a bed and breakfast owner, because if you do have that claim and can't operate the business, then you lose not only your house but a source of income as well.
Justin, this is Robin again. I think one of the biggest lessons we learned, and probably a lot of business owners and innkeepers learned last year during COVID, was that pandemics were not covered. And I know that
Yep.
a lot of insurance companies and small business owners, maybe innkeepers, a lot of friction around that and trying to figure out what was going on. And now we did file a claim just so that it was recorded in the event that anything changed. But that whole process was an eye opener for us.
Yes, there were a lot of conversations that we had to have with business owners, not just in the bed and breakfast industry, but whether it be contractors, any other industry that we insure. And there were a lot of people that weren't happy because there is no coverage for viruses. So on every business policy, there is an exclusion for viruses. I don't know a lot about it, but there is such thing as pandemic insurance. So like regarding COVID, the only story I heard of someone actually getting coverage for insurance for the pandemic was actually Wimbledon over in Europe. So they were one of the only businesses in the world that purchased pandemic insurance, and during COVID they couldn't host their tournament. They lost out on a ton of income, but they did have coverage for it through their pandemic insurance. That's something I've never worked with before, so I can't tell you a whole lot about it. But yes, on the typical business owner's policy, there is a virus for exclusions, and the way that the insurance carriers kind of justify them not paying out for a claim like that is that there was no physical damage to any of your property. So it's not something that really could have been controlled by you. And I understand insurance is there for that purpose, but since there was no physical loss to the location, there's no grounds for a claim for a virus, if that makes sense.
Well, it does now. It doesn't sit well. However,
Yeah, I understand. Insurance can be a very finicky thing, but that's why you want to make sure that you have things insured properly. That's why Insurance Services United is like the diamond sponsor for PAPI, and because it's something that the bed and breakfast industry is something that we know very well. Like I said, I've only been here for about 2 years, so I'm still learning quite a bit. And but so far, bed and breakfast have been my number one industry that I've gone to. So that's why, yeah, good to find insurance agents and carriers that are there for your industry and have markets for your industry, as opposed to coming to a random State Farm agent and being like, hey, I have this business and this is what we do. Can I get a quote? And then they offer you a quote, and then it's $10,000 for a year, when realistically, if you go to an insurance carrier that likes your industry and wants to insure you, maybe that 10,000 quote then goes down to $2,500 a year or 2,000 or whatever it can be.
Any other questions for Justin? Justin, we're at 11:35. Did you have other information that you wanted to share?
I don't have a lot here to go over.
Okay.
I think the main things I want to touch on were the comparison between the homeowners and business policy, and then just a couple ways that you can lower risks and costs. I think we touched on on this then. So if there are any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. Just ask away. You can put them in the chat or turn on your mic, whatever you want to do.
I've got to hop off, Justin, but I learned a lot. Thank you. Took a lot of notes, and I will be in touch.
Okay, sounds great. Glad I could help.
Justin, this is Robin again, and squeaky wheel here. I'm going to circle back to the whole virus pandemic. So the reason we filed a claim, even though we were received the denies, we were advised by counsel to go ahead and file the claim anyway, get it on record. In the event that any class action suits were filed at any point after the pandemic, then we would have at least on record that we had filed a claim and that the insurance company acknowledged the claim and denied it, that we have that on record. Have you heard of any class action suits that have been filed?
I have not heard of any. So you're saying that, so when COVID started, you filed a claim just in case you were to have any sort of lawsuit in the future for it, or?
Correct.
Sorry, it's a little tough to hear your mic.
Yes, correct. That's why we did that.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't hear of any situations like that. All I know is, like I said, that if the loss that you're trying to submit a claim for is specifically related to COVID, and there's no sort of actual physical loss to the structure or the property, then I can't imagine that the insurance carriers would actually cover it and have some sort of payout for you because of that virus exclusion on every policy. And that's not something where you can say to your agent or your carrier, hey, I have this exclusion on my policy, can I get it taken off so that virus is covered? They would say no, there are reasons why we don't cover this, and here's why. So.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Justin, kind of a related question though. Just the fact that you filed a claim in that kind of scenario, even though if your insurance company would deny it, wouldn't that impact if you were either seeking insurance or at time of renewal? Would that, since you filed a claim, even though the insurance carrier didn't pay, that would be a claim that would be looked at and say, okay, you filed a claim, so now we're going to increase your rates a little bit. Wouldn't that be right?
So it kind of depends. So there are cases where you can file a claim and it doesn't get paid out. And depending on if they completely filed it or not, it will show up in what's called loss runs. So if you were to shop around for new insurance and the insurance carrier requested loss runs from the prior agent, then yes, there is a chance that would show up. However, the way that it would show up on the loss runs is that you had the claim on this date, this is what it was for, this is how much was paid out. And if they see that you have a claim that has nothing paid out, then the agent should ask you, hey, what was this claim about? And then you can tell them, hey, I made a claim for COVID just in case I was able to get something out of it. They wouldn't cover anything, nothing was paid out, and nothing really happened. It's just we didn't really have much business because of COVID. And then the insurance agent would then be able to go back to the insurance carrier and say, this is what the situation was. It's not like their roof collapsed and the insurance carrier wouldn't cover it. It's not like they had some sort of death at the bed and breakfast that was a liability claim. They just did this just in case. So can we get this claim excluded from their loss runs? So that's how it should be able to work. Again, it's going to be up to each insurance carrier whether or not they're going to accept that. But a lot of times, if the agents maintain a good relationship with the insurance carriers, then that's something that they can sort of communicate with the insurance carrier and have them remove it from consideration on getting a quote or your rates in general. I hope that kind of made sense. Again, I kind of bounce around when I answer these questions.
Yeah,
my brain goes in a bunch of places, but
yeah, just a little bit of background, Justin. At the beginning of the pandemic, when the Congress was working on the relief bills, a lot of, not only bed and breakfast, but hoteliers and stuff were all like, shut down because of the COVID. looking at those insurance policies, they're like, okay, there was a virus exclusion. So, many associations, across the country were lobbying Congress to backstop that for, insurance companies to be able to file those claims. And that's why many bed and breakfast owners filed the claims in the hopes that if the federal government came in and said, okay, we're going to backstop that, but it would be billions of dollars,
Right, that's the thing.
for the insurance company's not on the hook, but they were going to backstop the insurance companies to process those claims. That never materialized.
Right.
So
So a lot of times insurance carriers are backed by some sort of fund, whether it be federal based or state based. And if the insurance carrier doesn't have the actual funds to pay out all these claims, then that's where the secondary, it's called reinsurance. That's where the reinsurance policy kicks in to pay out those claims. However, if you have, 85% of businesses in the United States trying to make a claim for COVID, and the federal government is saying, hey, you guys have to pay these claims out, then almost every insurance carrier is going to go bankrupt, and then insurance isn't going to exist. But if it did exist, then your rates would be insanely high, because they have to recoup those funds in some sort of method. So that's another part of why COVID was not something that could really be paid out for by insurance, if that makes sense.
okay, it's almost 11:45. Anybody else have any other questions for Justin? Okay, hearing no other
All right.
questions. Thank you, Justin, very much for joining
Sure.
us today. That was very informative. When I send out the recording, I'll be sure to include your email address and phone number as well.
Yep. If
Okay.
anyone wants me to take a look at their current policies and review them, anything like that, I can just give you some information on them. If you want me to shop around, just let me know, shoot me an email, give me a call. Yeah, I'm here to help you guys out. So
Okay. All right. Thank you, Justin, very much. Thanks, everybody,
You're
for
welcome.
joining. Everybody have a good day, the rest of your day. And the next workshop is going to be on March 30th, Tuesday at noon. It's on Get More Direct Bookings. And you can go to pains.com. On our homepage. We have educational seminars to register for that. So with that, everybody have a good day. Thanks, Justin.
Yep. Thanks, Rose. Have a good
Bye-bye.
one.
Have a great day.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.